passage is adapted from the Preface to neurologist Oliver Stack's collection of essays, An Anthropologist on Mars, written in 1995 by Oliver Stack. Nature's imagination, as Freeman Dyson likes to say, is richer than ours, and he speaks marvelingly of this richness in the physical and biological worlds, the endless diversity of physical forms and forms of life. For me as a physician, nature's richness is to be studied in the phenomena of health and disease, in the endless forms of individual adaptation by which human organisms, people, adapt and reconstruct themselves. Defects, disorders, diseases in this sense can play a paradoxical role in bringing out latent powers, developments, evolutions, forms of life that might never be seen or even be imaginable in their absence. It is the paradox of disease, in this sense, its creative potential, that forms the central theme of this book. Thus, while one may be horrified by the ravages of developmental disorder or disease, one may sometimes see them as creative too, for if they destroyed particular paths, particular ways of doing things, they may force the nervous system into making other paths and ways, force on it an unexpected growth and evolution. This other side of development or disease is something I see potentially in almost every patient, and it is this which I am especially concerned to discuss. Similar considerations were brought up by A.R. Luria, who studied the long-term survival of patients who had cerebral tumors or who had suffered brain injuries or strokes, and the adaptations they used to survive. He also studied deaf and blind children as a very young man with his mentor, L.S. Vygotsky. Vygotsky stressed the antagonists rather than the deficits of such children. A handicapped child represents a qualitative different, unique type of development. If a blind child or a deaf child achieves the same level of development as a normal child, then the child with a deficit achieves this in another way, by another course, by another means. And for the pedagogue, it is particularly important to know the uniqueness of the course along which he must lead the child. This uniqueness transforms the minus of a handicap into the plus of compensation. That such radical adaptations could occur demanded, Luria thought, a new view of the brain, a sense of it not as programmed and static, but rather as dynamic and active, a supremely efficient adaptive system geared to evolution and change, ceaselessly adapting to the needs of the organism, its need above all to construct a coherent self and world. Whatever deficits or disorders of brain function befell it, that the brain is minutely differentiated is clear. There are hundreds of tiny areas crucial for every aspect of perception and behavior. The miracle is how they all cooperate, are integrated together in the creation of a self. This sense of the brain's remarkable capacity for the most striking adaptations not least in the special and often desperate circumstances of neural or sensory mishap, has come to dominate my perceptions of my patients and their lives. So much so, indeed, that I am sometimes moved to wonder whether it may not be necessary to redefine the very concepts of health and disease, to see these in terms of the ability of the organism to create a new organization and order, one that fits its special altered disposition and needs, rather than in the terms of a rigidly defined norm. Sickness implies a contraction of life, but such contractions do not have to occur. Nearly all of my patients, so it seems to me, whatever their problem, reach out to life, and not only despite their conditions, but often because of them, and even with their aid. The study of disease for the physician demands the study of identity, the inner worlds that patients under the spur of illness create. But the realities of patients, the way in which they and their brains construct their own worlds, cannot be comprehended wholly from the observation of behavior from the outside. With this in mind, I have taken off my white coat, deserted by and large the hospitals where I've spent the last 25 years to explore my subjects' lives as they live in the real world, feeling in part like a naturalist examining rare forms of life, in part like an anthropologist, a neuroanthropologist in the field, but most of all like a physician called here and there to make house calls at the far borders of human existence.